Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining me from. I am waiting for people to join a little bit. In the meantime, oh goodness, the background noise is so much for me. I don't even know if you can hear, but it's so much of background noise for me. Anyway, if you're here, if you're listening in, then do leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're joining me from. And did you have a chance to um, go through what the agenda is for the day? Let me know. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to just bring up one document that I didn't think I'll need, but I realized maybe it's a good idea to have it around. Also, let me know if you're able to hear me. Are you here? Yes. Okay. I am still trying to get a document around. So just give me a bit and we shall start soon in the meantime. Oh my god, there's so much background noise. Okay, so what is the agenda for the day? I had people ask me a few questions on um, just a second on my Instagram and my Facebook. So I do want to talk about those questions and I want to address them here. Apart from that, I also want to um, have continue that research paper discussion. I don't know if you were around when I had that discussion, so I will probably share the information with you about what discussion we had on the research paper, what was the research paper, what were the thoughts that we were bouncing off of, and then we will talk about um, I think there was one question I saw in one of the groups that I am there on, and someone asked there, "What do you feel judged for your dog's behavior, and how do you feel about it?" So I thought maybe that's a good discussion to have because it's quite. Um, I think it's quite common that. Let me just bring this down for now. It's quite common that a lot of us. Might feel a judgment around how our dogs behave. Maybe we feel like we need our dogs to behave in a certain manner, conform to the socially acceptable standards of behavior. And when that doesn't happen, then how do we deal with that? So I think these are the conversations I wanted to have. Again, if you're here, if you're listening in, do leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening in from. If you're tuning in for the first time, if you don't know who I am, I'm Saujanya Vijayanagar. I'm from Bangalore, India. I am a certified canine behavior consultant and applied ethologist from Barks. And I talk a lot about gentle parenting. I talk a lot about emotional experience. I talk about biosocial psychological approach to behavior. And yeah, these are all the things that you will get to hear about. Get to hear here, as well as I do talk a lot about free living dogs, street dogs in India, and my interactions and observations of them. When I do talk about them, I do want to make it clear that there are so many street dogs and so many experiences that they might have, that what I share here are my observations combined with the research that I do on them. I hope that clears it up. I do run my practice called Dog Promise. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the name Dog Promise as well. Of course, I do have an agenda for today, but that doesn't mean you cannot ask your questions. So please go ahead. If you have any questions for me, ask them in the comments, in the live chat, and I will respond to them. But if you're asking questions very specific to your dog and your situation, I can probably provide you with some kind of guidance or what would be the next steps or way forward, but that cannot be a replacement for a consultation, because I think only someone who can understand your entire case and understand your dog, your situation, can truly help you for your situation. So, with that, I think we should get started with the live. So, what has been happening with you all the last week? How have you all been? How was the last live stream? If you tuned in, we spoke about Snow's story. Anushri was here to share her insights, her journey with Snow, and there was quite a lot to learn for all of us. How did you find that live? Um, for me, the last week has been overwhelmingly tiring. It was a busy, busy week. And I have been reading research papers. Those of you who are there on my Instagram are aware of it. I have been There's a study that we are doing, and I am trying to do my groundwork on that. So there has been a lot of study happening there, which is where you're getting all these research excerpts from. Whenever I'm finding either something utterly infuriating or something that is worth pondering upon or something that's worth sharing, I have been doing that on Instagram. So if you love that, do follow me there. um, I before I went on a break, the week that I didn't do the live stream, I had a consultation with a client, and she said something that was so emotional for me during the session. And I thought, if you've not seen that, I thought I'll play that, and I wanted to share that with you, because that is a testament to what work we do using the Bugs way, the approach that I take with my clients and in our consultations. I'll play that video, and I thought it's worth sharing. Just give me a second. Spoke about her health, right? And you went and got a test done for thyroid.
Yes, I did, and you told me to read the book. I even
Yeah.
read the book. I'm still reading it. I mean, what I've read, I'm reading it again, and every time it's like a new thing which crops up, and I don't know how to thank you enough for that. You literally, you literally saved her life, is what I can say.
Well
Because
done.
her condition was so bad, Saujanya. Her skin was full of bruises and blood. I used to weep looking at her
Yeah.
because she's one day I hugged her and I was wearing white and this was full red. It's I mean it sounds okay to tell, but to see it, right? And the moment I followed all what you told me and I fought for her, I built her case, spoke to her vet, and we started for meds, and her itching is reduced. Forget getting hair back, right? All the time, constantly in the night, she used to itch,
Yeah.
and it was very annoying for her. So that's all gone.
So this was a client. I worked with her literally one session. We had one session. She had reached out to me because she wanted to help her dog better. She wanted her dog was had had a few instances of bad instances with dog to dog interactions, and her dog had also started becoming anxious, and so she wanted to help her dog, anxious on walks, and so she wanted to help her dog. And before we began our sessions, and that's my process, right? I do get them to fill a form, so get some videos, and when I did see the videos, I felt like the dog is struggling with some kind of a health issue, but it's worth having a conversation in the session. And when we started piecing the different pieces of puzzle during the session, I did suggest her to make a case for her dog, to advocate for her dog. And I think that is so important, um, that we can equip ourselves and the dog parents that we work with, um, to build a case for their dog and advocate for their dog, because I think that is so critical, especially, I guess, with I think with all professionals that you work with as a dog parent. I think it's worth um, fighting for your dog. And I think who else would if not you? And this particular client managed to do that for her dog. We sat and I shared with her the possible symptoms that I think I'm seeing. And then she went ahead, she made a case for her dog. She went and spoke to her vets. They went through with the medical tests necessary, and they did find that there was a health concern there. And they started her on medications, and things drastically improved for her dog. And you can see her talk about it. And when she said that you literally saved my dog's life, I felt like that was the biggest compliment one can give me for the work that I do. And I take it with utmost, um, I think, humility, because a part of work that I do is to give the dog parents the information that they need. But at the end of it, I do believe that the action is on their end. And if there has been a success, I think the big part of the credit goes to the dog parent. So I did want to give a shout out to the dog parent as well. She was amazing in following through the conversations we had. It also reminded me of what happened with Sammy. I think when Sammy uh, we started seeing a lot of hyperactivity around food. And for a large part, I think I was introduced to Sindoor and Bak's way and this approach, I think when Sammy was already 6 7 years old. So up until then, we only believed that what we were told, which is a golden retriever, very hyper around food, is a very normal breed trait to have. So there's nothing that you need to be worried about. And there's nothing wrong with him health wise. But there were certain things we were seeing. I was seeing hyperactivity around food, which was one behavior, but we were also seeing a lot of health issues, which was repeated skin issues, repeated ear infection, repeated a constant itching. um, and there was also gut issues, that is, he would have either vomiting or loose motions or some kind of digestive issue repeatedly, and every few months he would have something of the sort. And it was, whenever we would reach out to our vet, whenever the issue happened, it was always symptomatic treatment. I don't know how many of you have experienced similarly, where your dog is struggling with something and there's constantly the the treatment is symptomatic and not really figure out what's the underlying cause. So that is how, I mean, when I met Sindoor and when I consulted her back, when I went to her as client, that was a situation where we were being given symptomatic treatment for his issues. And we were also told that behavior wise, this was a very normal behavior to have. Um, then we realized we were not giving great food to both our dogs. So we changed diet, but I didn't see considerable change in his hyperactivity around food. After that, we started seeing quite a bit of weight loss for him. He started losing weight. He was, I think, 34 or 35, 36 kilos when in 2017, around that period. And he started losing weight. He went from there to 32. Then there was a period when he was 27, 28, to a point where he reached 22 in the last 1 or 2 years of his life. So he had lost considerable amount of weight. And I would repeatedly feel like there's something up with his health. I felt like there's either EPI or IBD for him, and I did go to a vet to get that tested, and they did some preliminary test, and this was back in 2019 or 2020, and they said it was normal. Mind you, at this point, I was again not someone who had researched either of these conditions and what kind of symptoms I'm looking for, or what kind of tests were necessary. So I do advise all my clients that do the research, because I have learned it firsthand, that I think researching about your dog's symptoms and their possible health concerns can actually go a long way in advocating for your dog. So that happened, and he again, the test came back normal. So then we kept working on diet, but I knew internally there was something off. Right, and then I started researching about EPI and IBD in a lot more detail. I started looking at the lived experiences of other dog parents who have dogs with similar conditions. What were the symptoms their dogs were showing? What are the tests that they got done? I did research, like I studied research papers around these symptoms and what were the tests required. And finally, I think in 2021 or 2022, we managed to get to a vet who agreed to do the tests that we told them that we wanted. And finally, we realized that he had vitamin B12 deficiency, something that I think in humans, one of the tests that they tend to do when you do see health issues is vitamin B12 deficiency. And for Sammy, somehow nobody recommended that that's a test you need to get done if there are gut issues. And we finally, I did tell them that I want to do a B12 test. I want to do a folate test, I think folate or iron, one of them. And I wanted to do the TLI test that is necessary for EPI. And finally, we figured vitamin B12 was the issue. And the moment we started giving him the medications necessary for that, things drastically improved for him. His itching, that constant itching that he used to have all the time, no matter what topical medications that we gave, it was not a skin issue. It was an underlying condition that was, in the gut, that then translated into his skin. So yes, it reminded me of that as well, where I think if someone can guide us and see and pinpoint that these are the symptoms and these could be the health conditions, it can be so good and so helpful for the dogs. And I'm kind of grateful that I think finally, in the final year of his life, he did get to live mildly healthily, and the issue that he was struggling with was sorted. So I think I was quite overwhelmed by that consultation. I was quite grateful for the words that the client used. So I thought I'll share that update as well. What else has been happening? It's been a busy week. So there were a few questions that I got on my Instagram and Facebook, and I thought we will talk about that. Right, the first question that I had, I will bring up the question so that I'm not. Um, yeah. So first question I had was by one of the people on my Instagram who asked me, what do street dogs need in a home? If you're listening in, let me know. If you're listening later too, do leave a comment if you felt like my response is helpful. But I want to first start off with something that I have been kind of morally and ethically struggling with. Um, so I don't know how many of you all have heard all my previous lives. If you have even heard even one, you would have heard of Lady Laddu and Bala. They are our three street dogs who tend to come home regularly, right? Um, and interestingly, we are at a juncture right now where we may have to move homes from where we are currently. And ever since that thought came in my mind that we might have to move, I have been struggling with what to do about the three dogs. And I'll pose the question here and let me know what would you do and what do you think someone should do in the situation, and then I'll tell you my thought process as to what I came up with. So there are multiple things that I can do in the situation. I can decide to adopt all three dogs because they have been coming over at home, and there is some amount of relationship that we have built, and there is some amount of dependency that they might have on me and my husband. um, so adopt all three dogs. Let the three dogs remain street dogs and leave them be, and believe that someone else will take care of them or they'll find their way. um or third idea was that take them with us and let them have a similar lifestyle that they have right now. If you don't know what kind of a lifestyle they have right now, they tend to come home in the morning, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., around that time. They come here, they spend the entire day here. They're sleeping mostly, and then by nighttime, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., they go back outside. So this is how their lifestyle is right now. So if you were in the situation, what do you think you would do, or what is the right thing to do here? The reason I ask this question is I have seen a lot of people, even um, on posts that I share of street dogs, there are a lot of people who suggest to adopt a street dog when the street dog um, tends to build a relationship with a human around them. So knowing this, I would like to understand what would probably your approach be, and would adopting all of them be the right way to go about, would leaving them behind be the right way to go about, would adopting one of them be the right way to go about it, um, or taking them along with us and replicating the same lifestyle be the right way? Chandni says that's a tricky one, but I feel whatever is done, it should be a trial and error kind of thing, no? To somehow try and give them a choice. Yes, this was one of the things that I thought about, right? Should I probably try and take them along with me? Should I probably leave them behind and see how things pan out? Um, that was one thing. Aparna says, I would leave them behind with a broken heart. They would be happier there, would arrange for someone to give them food on a regular basis and ensure they receive medical help when they need it. This was the other bit, right? I felt like, yeah, maybe I should just leave them behind. There were two reasons for that, right? One was I didn't want to adopt just one of them. If at all it went down the adoption route, I didn't want to adopt just one of them because they are clearly a group. I don't know if they're a family unit because I don't know the history before they came into the street. And they came into the street as adults, especially Laddu and Lady came into the street as adults. And Bala was already, he was not a young puppy. He was grown up to a point of probably 4 5 months old. So none of them were born here, or I don't know their parentage. I don't know where they come from. So I don't know their family unit, whether they're a family, but I do know they're a group. I didn't feel like it's the right thing to break the group. So either the decision was to leave all three of them here or bring all three of them home. Okay. Keep sharing your thoughts. I'll come to the next part of it. Now, so I see a very stark difference in their behaviors when they are on streets versus when they are in the house, versus when they're in the house and have no option to go out. It's very interesting because on the street, when all three of them are on the street, I haven't seen them get into conflicts with each other. So they are mostly like a group, like a solid group, with each other when they are outside, and it's almost like them against the world. So they are very intrigued. If one of them gets curious about something, the others follow suit. If one of them is going a particular direction, the others follow suit. If one of them sees a dog and they're not sure who that is and they're not part of the group, then all of them, form a group so that none of them are alone, right? So that's how they are outside our premises. But the moment the three of them come home, they all are probably individually separated, in the sense that just this morning, when I was letting Laddu inside, so Laddu came about an hour or two after Lady came in. So Lady was already sleeping, and Laddu wanted to enter the house, and Lady was growling at him. When he was trying to enter the house, and I had to actually split them. I had to reassure both of them. I had to create distance between the two and create a passage for Laddu to enter while both of them don't get into an escalated conflict. That is between Laddu and Lady. Laddu doesn't allow Lady to come into parts of the house beyond where she sleeps. So that's him. Both of them don't let Bala enter the house. Bala is constantly sleeping at the threshold. So it's very interesting that the same three dogs, who are like inseparable group and unit outside our premises, end up having getting into conflicts inside our home. So the next question is, if I do adopt them, uh, it's a question of what kind of behavior changes I'm anticipating with them. So that's one amongst their own dynamics, right? The other is, I have seen that when people come over, and we have a lot of these delivery people who come over, and our house is such that there's a lot of traffic that passes by our front gate. And so there are a lot of vehicles that kind of slow down in front of us. There are a lot of vehicles that get parked right in front of our house. And every time someone passes by, all the dogs get flustered and they start barking, they start growling at people who come and stand at our gate. And interestingly, they do better when they can just go out of the gate and not be in the premises, or not, they hate being locked up anywhere. So it's not something that they prefer, where you shut the gate or the door and my husband is probably having a conversation with the guest or the visitor. They would hate it. They hate it. There's constant growling, there's constant barking. So today I have an option of them deciding to go out of the house. But would I be in the same situation when I move homes? And if I don't, then what kind of situations I'm going to end up creating just by having them home, by adopting them entirely? There are few things that happen when I end up thinking of them like as adopted dogs. I feel like they lose a lot of the agency that they tend to have right now. They might lose a lot of um, social interactions that they might have, because what are they doing in the nighttime? They're probably going to other homes, other people. They're probably just roaming around, because I ended up realizing that they know every food joint on the main road that's close to our house. They end up going all over there. They seem to have another dog friend, which we only realized last week. That dog friend doesn't come to our street, but apparently they have another dog friend. They have another house where they hang out at, where there's a small child. So they do have a lot of other social circle and social interactions that they tend to have, which might then be restricted just by virtue of being inside the house and not having the kind of freedom that they enjoy today. So do you wonder, I mean, it's worth thinking about that. No matter how well intentioned I might be and well informed I might be as well in terms of choice, agency, consent, all of these things, just by virtue of getting them home and having them in my premises as my dogs. Do you think that a lot of their autonomy goes away? And do you suppose that a lot of behavior problems that we tend to see in our dogs may be stemming from there? What do you think? It's very interesting because I read a paper quite similar to this context. I would like to discuss that paper in more detail, but um, in Mexico, this paper was about dog parents, dog caregivers in Mexico, where the dogs are not always indoors. So it seems like a very inside outside dog or a community dog situation, while there might be one or two caregivers for the dogs. Um, and all the behavior problems that one might assume a dog might have in a house situation, like barking, aggression, etc., uh, was not something that one perceived to be a problem in this kind of a situation in Mexico. So there were I think, two studies done, one in Australia, or one of the Australia, UK, or US. It was one of these three countries. I will look up that for you again. But the a similar study was then conducted in Mexico, where the dogs have a very different living situation. They are not indoors all the time, and I wonder if either dogs end up having struggle with dealing with triggers and situations just because they end up being in a house where they don't have the full autonomy of walking away from situations, of having to conform to the expectation of their dog parents. Today I don't have any expectations from the three of them. I don't have I am there for them. They are here with me, and we live completely expectation free. As much as I'd like to believe I don't have the same thing with Zoe, I think that there are some set of expectations from her, just because I believe she does not have the skills that similarly these three have. And so maybe I would expect that she doesn't go out of our house gate. Maybe I would always put her on leash when we go outside, as long as I'm not aware of what surroundings we are in. So I think there are some expectations and some restrictions that do come with dog ownership. um, and I wonder if that is also a contributing factor to what we see with our dogs. What are your thoughts about this? And I'll come to what my final decision has been with them. I will share that with you. But I feel like if I were to adopt them, I feel like there there will be room for more conflict. I think there will be more instances of conflict. I think there will also be more I might rob them of the autonomy that they seem to have right now, and also the kind of the variety in their life right now. I think I could model it for them. I could kind of facilitate it for them, but it wouldn't be entirely how it is for them today. Any thoughts? So when Chandni said it's a tricky one, that's exactly how I felt. Like, on one hand, I think they have developed a sense of emotional attachment to an extent where one full week when we were not at home, and we have a camera that oversees our front porch and the gate, and every single day at the same time in the morning at around 7:30 in the morning, lady comes home and she knocks on our door to be open, to be let in. And I feel like that level of dependency, that level of attachment has developed over a period of time. And whether they're coming here because they want a safe space to rest, whether they're coming here because they love us and our home, whether they're coming here for food, or whether they're coming here because they want to be with us at home. That was a question that was kind of troubling me, and I felt like, if I left them on the street, am I robbing them of probably the decision that they want to make, which is to like stay home? So that was in favor of probably adopting them. And again, as I said, adopting them altogether was the only way forward. It's either all of them or none of them. The reason for not adopting them, and I think I feel more strongly about that, is that not a single day in the last, I think Laddu has been coming home since October. Lady has been coming home since November or December. I think November. I remember my sister was here and Lady was coming here regularly at that time. So Laddu from October, Lady from November, and not a single day in all of this period have either of them or any of them stayed the entire night here. And it's not because we wanted to chuck them out, it was their choice. And even on the nights when they tend to be here a little longer than normal, so there have been times when they're here at like 12 a.m., 1 a.m., and then we'd assume probably tonight they want to spend the time at home. And clearly by within a half an hour of that, they start banging at the door, they're whining, they're barking, they come, to the room, and they're like, can I go out? And so it's quite interesting for me that they do want to be at home when they want to be at home, but they don't want to be inside our premises the entire time. They haven't at any occasion spent a full 24 hours at home. And that makes me think that maybe they prefer an indoor outdoor setup. They don't want to be indoor all the time, and they might be choosing indoors probably for safe resting space, for food because they do get their meals here, and for the connection that we have built over the period of 6 months almost. So if I don't adopt them, then is there a way to give them and meet these needs even when we are not around? And I think that is what we finally came down to with the three of them, which is, if we do move, we probably, and as Aparna said, I would leave them behind with a broken heart, and I would also, because I know that they are very well capable to be on streets. That's the other important factor, right? um, I have seen them on streets, I've seen them with people, I've seen them with traffic and vehicular movement, I have seen them with other dogs, and all three of them are very much capable of surviving on streets. They don't have a health condition that requires constant medications or for them to live under someone's supervision all the time. um, and I think they have more going for them when they're on the street freely roaming around than when they are at home. So finally we did come up with that decision, while ensuring that someone is there to feed them, while ensuring that someone is there to check on them when necessary, while also probably thinking that maybe we can visit them frequently just to check on them in terms of their health, that everything is going fine for them, someone's there to take care of them, um, and someone is there for their medical needs. So I feel that that might work so much better in their favor than it does when, if at all, we were to adopt all of them. The other thing, and this was an interesting conversation that we had, that Sindur pointed during one of the Bach's conclaves and auditoriums. And if you have not signed up for a Bach's conclave or auditorium, I think you should definitely reach out to Bach's and see how you can do that. But I think there was a conversation on attachment, and I brought this point up of how it looks in street dogs, especially yeah, free roaming dogs that we see in India, and what is the concept of attachment with them. Because they do come to our house, but they also go to our neighbor's house who also feed them and they spend time right there. They also go to another house where they spend time with the family there, where there's a small child. And so, is it possible that it's attachment? Is it attachment with us? Is it attachment with multiple families? How does it look in street dogs? And Sindur said something very interesting, which is it might be worth thinking what is the attachment styles of street dogs, because it doesn't fall into how we think about attachment in companion dogs, and it somehow looks like how it is probably in secure adults in humans. And how do secure adult humans look? They seem like they have um, multiple people that they have an attachment bond with, uh, whom they go to for their particular needs, but they're not fully putting all their eggs in one basket. They're not fully relying on a friend, they're not fully relying on an intimate partner, they're not fully relying on a child or a parent. I think big as secure adults, as secure adults who can form emotional connection with multiple individuals, uh, and understand that every individual can meet different needs and you don't have to rely on one person for everything. It seems like free roaming dogs, street dogs that we see in India, or at least that we are seeing around and observing, seem to have a very similar attachment style. And that's quite interesting, because then, if that's the case, then I'm sure that Laddu Lady and Bala have not put all their eggs in this basket. I'm pretty sure that they have a lot of other places that they go to where all of their needs are met individually as well. And in that sense, I'm again not worried if I were to leave them back. This was my context. I did want to share the story because I feel like a lot of people do want to bring in street dogs home because they feel like that's the right thing to do. But I guess there's more nuanced conversation we need to have. I do want to point out that I don't mean that the life on streets is all bed of roses. It's as difficult as, uh, being at home could also be for the street dogs. It's about navigating difficulties, and if a dog who is born on streets, raised on streets, with the skills to live on streets, is able to do it, is healthy enough to do it, is in an environment with caregivers who are going to take care of them for their medical and social and nutrition needs, then I think it's worth considering as an option, right? But what about the dogs who cannot live on streets, who do get adopted, or who are taken off from the streets because living on the street is high risk for them? For example, very young puppies. I know that a rescue friend of mine who rescued a, a mother and her puppies. One of the puppies died on the street because the puppy was so tiny that people could not see the puppy on the street, and that's so unfortunate. So that happens too, right? Both kinds of realities are there for the street dogs. So she did want to get the puppy adopted. The mama ended up, I think, no, the mama also got adopted, but initially she did want to get the puppy adopted because it was high risk for the puppy to stay on the streets. In that situation, what is the right way to allow for a good life for a street dog, a dog that has been taken off the streets and been adopted by a family and has now become a companion animal? And a lot of families are in such situations where they do adopt street dogs for multiple reasons, and I would assume these are valid reasons of adoption. How do you then give them what they need and a life that they can live and thrive? And I think the biggest thing is how to give them as much agency, control, and choice in their life for themselves as is possible in a home environment. So for example, with lady comes home and she would reject some of the foods we would offer to her. And irrespective of whether it's lady or Zoe, whether it's companion animal for me or a street dog who's coming home, I have learned to start offering more choices in food, um, in walking, in sleeping, spots, in whatever, in social interaction, also in interaction with me, in forms of connection. I have learned to start offering choices. So when lady would reject food, I offered various choices for her in that. So it was interesting because one is the perception one has is that a street dog would eat anything because they are so um, short on resources, but she wouldn't budge. She wouldn't like something and she wouldn't eat it for sure. um, and that was interesting. But knowing that she was rejecting something that I was offering as food, and if I wanted her to eat and feel like she can, rely on me for her meals, I also wanted to try out what else can I offer to her. So I think offering choices for everything in their life, offering agency, right, where they feel like they have the control to walk away from situation if they want to, say no if they want to, not do something if they don't want to, as long as it's not hampering their, it's, as long as it's not a life and death situation. I think offering them as many choices as possible, as much of agency as possible, um, is something that I would definitely work on. And I think that is my biggest, like, the the biggest requirement, I think, for dogs who have lived a life of freedom, have lived a life where they live on their terms, to then come into a house where they don't have much say in anything. uh, I think the biggest thing would be how to model that for them, how to facilitate a very similar kind of a lifestyle while in the confines of the four walls. I think that would be the biggest one. The other is what I have mentioned here, which is how to build trust, how to build respect, how to understand them better, and work with empathy. I think when you use these aspects of building a relationship, it becomes easy. How to build trust? How do you know that they can trust you? How can you show them that they can trust you? Um, that goes with respecting their consent, respecting them, building a trusting relationship, understanding them. So I think these, oh my goodness, the mirror is just bothering me. So I think these are definitely important facets of building a relationship with them. And at the end, then work with them in different situations. So I think with street dogs or any dog, I would, and in fact, this was the other question that was asked, which is how do you build the relationship with a adopted shelter dog? And I know that all of these dogs would have come to us with different contexts. You would have brought a puppy home, you would have brought a street dog home, you have adopted a dog from shelter, a dog with extreme traumatic history, like we spoke about in Snow's case. In all of the cases, irrespective of their background and with what baggage or clean slate or whatever that they come with, trust, respect, understanding, and empathy becomes your base foundation of working with them. And I think consent agency falls in the trust and respect spectrum itself. So I think if your goal is relationship building, if your goal is to have your dog thrive in their new environment, if your goal is their welfare, if you want to provide the right kind of life for them, Start with trusting them, start with building trust with them, so have them trust you. Respect them for the choices, respect them for the individual they are today, respect them for their experiences and their communication. Understand them, understand where they're coming from, understand what their needs might be, understand what their um, preferences are, understand their interactions. And finally, I think if you are operating from the point of empathy, everything kind of falls into place, because this is where it will lead you to. And so I think I kind of answered both the questions together. And I think the person who asked, Aparna is here, she's the one who asked the question about adopting shelter dog, building relationship with an adopted shelter dog. And Aparna, if you have any questions, you can ask as well, and I'm happy to like have that dialogue with you here. But at the end of it, I think any dog who comes home, again, could be a young dog whom you brought home, it could be a shelter dog with a baggage that they're carrying, it could be a street dog, it could be any dog that you bring home. And I think before we start working on all of these things, I think there's a need for um, space where they just start understanding what's this new life and new environment that they've come to. Is this person, I can rely on? Is this someone I can uh, communicate with? Is this someone with whom I can build connection? What is this new space that I've ended up in? I think it takes time for them to start making sense of this new world they're in. And before we start doing all of the social interactions and socialization and training and things like that, I think it is important that we give them some time to just adjust and learn about their new environment. I think that's a good starting point to work with, and then work on all of the other things that we spoke about: consent, agency, choices, trust, respect, understanding, all of these things. I hope that helps if you're listening in. Um, Another question I think was on very similar lines. This was from Facebook on my Gentle Parenting of Dogs group. If you're not on that group, do definitely join in and share your questions that you might have, thoughts you might have about gentle parenting. The question was, I think, if I understand that correctly, this person has two dogs. Both were rescues brought to her. One was adopted as an older dog, and one as a little younger dog. Um, and the older dog, the dog that she adopted first, had fear and anxiety concerns, um, or rather situations where they would get fearful or anxious. And since the second dog came in, um, the first dog started becoming a lot more confident, but still have the triggers going for them. And the person mentioned that they have tried all the force free approaches, but it has not fully worked for them. So I think that was an interesting one. And I think I will still, I think it's a very similar approach that I would say with whether street dogs, consent based, parenting, or whether it is about, adopted shelter dog. I think I would use very similar approaches in all of these cases, but with fearful and anxious dogs. And I did have the anxious dog program, basically caring for your anxious dog program. And our approach was first and foremost expectation setting for us, right? I think with anxiety or fear, there is, I think we spoke about this in the live that I did with Anushri as well, where there is an inherent expectation that we want to cure our dogs of the anxiety or of the fear or of whatever trauma that they have. And there is this urgency to do that as well. And I think, as a person who has had um, a journey with anxiety, I have realized that I have done much better when I've accepted that there are situations that makes me anxious. There are situations that maybe my anxiety is not curable. Maybe my anxiety is a product of the world and the society we live in, the kind of expectations one might have of us. Um and so the work I need to do is more about first recognizing what my triggers are, recognizing the situations in which I get anxious, understanding my patterns of how things work internally and externally when I'm anxious or when I'm starting to get anxious, and what are my coping mechanisms in the situations now that I know it's anxiety inducing. The moment I kind of shifted the narrative from I need to get rid of my anxiety to I know these are the situations that make me anxious, my anxiety may just be a product of the world we live in and the expectations we have of each other, and that I need some coping mechanisms. Once I recognize my patterns, I realize that my the number of times I would get anxious, the extent to which I would get anxious, the escapist attitude I would have in situations that were anxiety inducing, I think it kind of reduced extensively. So I think the expectation setting of what are we expecting when we are working with an anxious dog or a fearful dog, and this is something I do with every discovery call when someone comes and tells me I have an anxious dog, is I tell them that maybe it's important that we have the right expectations of them and give them all of the background of it, but then also work with how to meet their needs. So an anxious dog doesn't, like I have social anxiety, so I do get anxious in social situations, but that doesn't mean I don't have social needs. um, and so how do I meet my social needs knowing I have social anxiety? And does it mean that I entirely get rid of social interactions because I have social anxiety? No, I don't do that. So how do we do that for our dogs too? When people say my dogs get anxious on walks, uh, it's probably the situations in which we are walking our dogs, it's probably the triggers that they encounter during walks, but they do want to be outdoors, probably they do want to explore the world around them. And how can we facilitate that while that not inducing anxiety and fear for them? So I think a big part of the work is firstly expectation setting and giving, like when I did my anxious dog program, I had to give room for the dog parents to feel like they don't have to do it in a certain way that they have done it previously or they have been told they should do it in that manner. If it's not working for their dog, we can always alter the approach, we can always alter the way. For example, one of the dogs that in the program was fearful of walks, and the, and she lived in Mumbai, and if any of you know how Mumbai is, it is extremely sensory overwhelmed even for humans. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of sounds, there's a lot happening all the time. Uh, but when I gave the permission or the reassurance to the dog parent that you don't have to do it this manner, you can tweak it a little bit and you can change things up a little bit for your dog. And she changed the way she was walking her dog after we had conversations about it. And she messaged me saying that her dog was loving going outdoors and walking. The She was not as fearful anymore, even of the things that she was fearful before. So I don't if you're in India, you would know of these milkmen who come with the cans, the aluminum cans, milk cans, and you know that they can make a lot of noise, that vehicle and the cans can make a lot of noise. And I remember this client told me that her dog was very fearful of that sound. Her dog was fearful of men and sounds, and this instance was a combination of both. And when we started doing these walks differently, her dog stopped responding in that manner to this kind of sounds, this kind of even men that they would encounter during walks. And I think that is a big one, giving yourself permission to do things differently, and try it and see how that works with your dog. And I think it's worth a whole lot when we go back, try it for our dog and see what our dog responds with. um, so I think that is definitely how I would approach, cases with anxious dogs. And another big one, and I know I have promised this multiple times, but forgive me, apologies, I haven't had the time to deep dive on that topic, but active avoidance of triggers, I think that's a big one. And I when I was deep into my anxiety, there was a space where I was becoming escapist in my triggers. But when I changed it into becoming very mindful of knowing, okay, this is a trigger, I will give myself break from this for a while. And it was interesting that I came back, and even today, I think I'm able to meet those kind of situations in a much better manner because I gave myself break from situations that were triggering. How do we know there's a difference between escapist and active avoidance? Any thoughts? Because what I described now sounds like the same thing. Escaping a situation versus avoiding and giving myself break from the situation sounds like the same thing. So how is one escapist and the other active avoidance? Any thoughts on that? The reason I'm bringing this up is active avoidance is one of the biggest ways that we can work with in terms of fear and anxiety. But how do you know it's not escapist and it is actually active avoidance? Any thoughts? I'll wait for any response you might have. We're already 1 hour into the live. I didn't realize. I hope someone is typing something. Okay, so I think with escapist, and this is what I kind of realized, escape when I was being escapist in these situations, I was wondering just that I started with actively avoiding things, but I've now recently learned that I'm actually and have been escaping. Interesting. So I'll tell you how I kind of in my head I'm able to differentiate between the two. Uh, Avoidance comes with more awareness of the stimuli, and escape is just a blanket for almost everything. Interesting thought process. I'll tell you how I made the difference where I knew I was being escapist versus where I was actively avoiding triggers. Um, about 3 years back, and if any of my clients from back then are here, maybe they'll know what I'm talking about, right? About 3 years back, this was the time when I was deep in my anxiety, and everything was triggering, right? In the sense, social, especially social interaction of any form, was triggering, right? So I would get fearful of phone calls, not fearful, of course, but just nervous about picking up a phone call, about having a phone conversation, about getting into consultation sessions with my clients, about meeting people, about going out for uh, any dog related thing, or even otherwise other social interactions as well. And escapist for me, I realized that I did commit to these situations. I would agree to be in that situation. So I'm not fully, as Varun pointed out, was not fully aware of my triggers, of the situations that would be triggering, but I would commit to it. So I would commit to a session with a client when I am struggling with anxiety, but last minute I would cancel. And I've done this, I have made that mistake, because the anxiety would peak right before that situation happened, and then I would have to escape no matter what, right? So there was a commitment to it, but when faced with it, I would cancel, I would escape the situation. Versus I did, after I started having this instance of repeatedly doing this, and I'm not I have to add the disclaimer, these are not technical definitions. This is what I felt like was the difference between the two for me, right? I'm not saying that this is valid for you. So Chandni, if your response is what you're saying, it might be a valid experience for you, and whatever Varun said, it might be a valid experience for him. So this is what I'm sharing is my experience. We can talk about the technical definitions of each of this at a different point. um, so escapist, for me, I felt like I became an escapist when I did commit to something, then realized it was trigger, and I had to avoid last minute the same situation, right? That was when it was deep. I was already anxious before, like in that situation. So that is how I felt I was being escapist. Versus when I realized I was deep in my anxiety, I did decide to take a step back from everything. I don't know how many of you guys were around, but you would have seen me put up post a story around that period saying that I need a break and I'm not taking sessions right now. And that was something that I did when I realized that I was struggling with something repeatedly. I was struggling, and I was then seeing it have effects on my work, on my personal life, and I had to do something about it, right? So, how I decided to do something about it? By taking a very conscious step back. I decided that I cannot have myself every day being bombarded either with phone calls that I was not anticipating, with phone calls that ended up being missed calls, with messages that went unanswered, with client sessions that were being rescheduled repeatedly. I realized I cannot have that happen repeatedly, because what it is doing is I am putting myself through anxiety, not giving myself break from the situations that were causing anxiety, leaving me with situation where I didn't have any space to think how do I want to deal with it, right? So it ended up being like every day there were calls that I would be missing, every day there were messages that went unanswered, every day there were sessions that were being rescheduled, and every day I was anxious. So I didn't end up in the thick of the situation that was making me anxious, but the time leading up to that situation did make me anxious. And I was so deep in it that I didn't have enough break from it to come up with strategies and coping mechanisms for myself. So when I did say that, okay, fine, I need a break from consultations, I need a break from this for some time, and I took a step back, I think that was me actively deciding to avoid the situation, but also avoid the lead up to that situation, giving myself enough time to come up with my strategies. And so today, if you have ever like signed up for sessions in the last 2 3 years, there is a calendar link that you have to book the call with. So I know that I am prepared for a call. It is not happening uh, out of the blue, which means that I am prepared. I'm not getting anxious like I would before. And a lot of other such similar, tweaks that I made with my process, with my approach, and with my coping mechanisms, that I think I haven't had the need to reschedule sessions, to miss calls because of my anxiety. And I think that to me was a big difference between active avoidance. And with dogs, what we end up doing is that we are not actively avoiding the triggers, and we're also not avoiding the lead up to the trigger as well. So a lot of times you do end up in a situation that is triggering for your dog, and then your dog is trying to escape that situation, and in the thick of things you want to walk away from it. But how about even thinking about all the things that lead to the situation that could also be causing anxiety for your dog. And I think active avoidance is, I think it gives us the permission to take break and to take step back, give yourself the time to recover, while not constantly being bombarded with that trigger. So I think that for me was a difference in my experience. Now, with Chandni's case, where she mentioned that she started with actively avoiding things, but I've now recently learned that I am actually and have been escaping. That's an interesting one, too. So, at what point you're avoiding it, at what point it becomes an escapist situation, is also again figuring out into. I'll talk about it from the dog's point of view as well, where again with Sammy, right? I think I've told the story many times on the lives before as well, where we would take him on walks, and he was not a very polite dog with other pet dogs. He would run up to them. There was constant barking. There was pulling on leash, and he would attempt to mount them. And so I realized that while it's not a pleasant experience for the other dogs, it's also not a great experience we were having on walks. He was not getting the time to like explore on walks, have an interesting, enriching walk. And instead, you know, um, once he met other pet dogs on walks, he would just get very hyper through the walk, and it become very difficult for us to just come back to a regulated space from where we can just continue our walks. So I decided to exercise active avoidance again, um, and we did that consciously for a very long time. Um, to a point where I realized that he and I enjoyed walking at the time we were. He would love meeting the street dogs on the street, and he would learn how to meet the street dogs. He would learn how to say no. He would learn to start exercising boundaries with them, because by this time he had also started becoming older, and the street dogs on our street back then were quite young puppies, so a lot of puppy energy. So he would actually be very patient with them and tell them, no, I don't like this. And interestingly, after we did this for quite some time, we would come up with like uh, pet dogs walking on the street. Um, and while I would get, very internally, I would be like, "Oh, I don't know how this is going to go." I didn't fully walk away from the situation. And to be honest, I didn't have the opportunity to either, on multiple occasions, because the street that we were walking on was just it was a it there was just one street that would lead to our house, and so if we were to come back home, that was the only way to come back home. So there was quite a few occasions when we were at the end of the street and now we want to go back home, but there were other dogs being walked there, and we have no choice but to kind of walk past them. And so in all of those occasions, Sammy was so amazing with the other dogs. In some of the situations, he saw them from afar and he was like, "I'm not interested." In some of the occasions, he was like, I want to know who you are." Walk up to them and then realize, okay, these people are quite like excitable, and I'm not interested. Uh, and that was quite interesting for me, that when we did come up to the situations that were triggering, or the ones that were making him hyper, he didn't first choose to walk away. He did try and then process the situation and decide what he wanted to do with it. And I, as his caregiver, didn't first look at how to run away from the situation. And I feel like that would then slowly start becoming towards escapism. So that's one. The other is, another example is with Zoe. So ever since Sammy passed away, we are not in a situation where we can leave her alone at home. So there is someone always with her. Um, so when my sister was leaving back to US after she visited in November, we all wanted to go and drop her back to the airport, and so Zoe had to come with us. In all of our lives, we have avoided situation where it can be overwhelming, overstimulating, too many people, too much happening. We have obviously avoided those situations, but in this occasion, it was a situation we couldn't avoid, but Zoe handled it so beautifully, and she coped with it so beautifully. So I feel like, uh, if not your own conscious decision, someday a situation will come up where you will have to face a particular situation that you have been avoiding for some time. And I feel like if you have been preparing to cope with that situation in a manner that works for the individual, then you wouldn't fully need to escape. But even if you're escaping, you're consciously you're walking away from situation that could otherwise make you feel dysregulated. So I think that is probably the difference that I have understood about active avoidance and escapism and walking away. And again, I'm saying that walking away from a bad situation, a triggering situation, a situation that can leave you dysregulated is not escapism. So I do want to point that out as well. We don't have to put ourselves in a bad situation, have us be left dysregulated in the name of uh, facing our fears, right? So I think that is something that I wanted to mention as well. So with anxious dogs, I think a big part of what you would want to do is active avoidance, which is actively, consciously, with full awareness, take a step back from the situations that are stressful, fearful, anxiety inducing for your dog, and not just the situation, but the 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 series of events leading to that situation as well. I don't know, does that make sense? Okay, so those were the questions that I got asked. There was one more question that I was asked, which was how to have your dogs, like how to get dog friends for your dog. And this was specifically from places where there were no street dogs. But even if you were to make have your dogs interact with street dogs, there is a very specific, like there are ways to do that, right? And I think that was an interesting question, because I know that a lot of us talk about street dogs, but in many places, other the dogs don't have the same kind of access to street dogs like we do. And so how do we allow for a social interaction like how maybe Zoe has with the street dogs here? Um, and when I did work with a few clients who are in these countries where there are no street dogs, I think the first and foremost important thing is, even when I tend to have allow for street dog interactions with Zoe, or with Sammy, it used to happen with full freedom of, we are ready to walk away if you want to walk away. And I think that is a starting point, because I know that a lot of times when we have companion dogs interact with each other, uh, there's not always enough space and freedom to walk away from the situation. So I think going into the interaction, knowing you can walk out of it even 2 minutes into the interaction, is a big plus point for yourself as well as for your dog, right? So I think freedom to walk away from the situation is a big one. If I feel like we are in a situation where either parties don't have the freedom to walk away if they want to, I would probably think twice about that interaction, especially if I've had time to think through that interaction, not obviously when I have ended up in the situation, but even then, how to facilitate, allowing for the dog to walk away. And with pet dog interactions, like two companion dogs, while you might be fully on board with giving your dog choice to walk away, knowing fully well what your dog is trying to communicate with their body language, not everybody is either on board or aware of their dogs in a similar manner. So I think choosing the right dog and dog parent, the family, becomes very critical, I think, in this situation, especially when it's a companion dog interaction. So I'm not talking about street dog right now. The other is, and I recently had a client who has adopted a very young dog, and um, and the other dog that she has is quite older. to uh, to this dog. And so the older dog is not entertaining all the puppy energy or the need for social interaction. And the thing that I told her is, maybe you would want to find street dog friends for your dog, but you have to find play dates at different levels. One is you would want to find a dog who is a mentor, right, who can teach your dog what's polite, what's impolite, what's a good, when how to take a break, how to explore, and not be just this hyper wired up puppy that you are. How to just, sniff around, take a break from, playing. If I ask you for, if I set a boundary, are you able to read these boundaries, how to be polite, things like this. So a mentor dog is definitely you know someone who is more patient, who is able to communicate, who is well versed with social cues themselves, who is well regulated. um, I think that is one kind of dog that, our dogs need as dog friends. But our dogs also need, same age group friends as well. So with this client that I had, who has a puppy, I was like, the only individual who can meet her puppy dog's energy, whom she that was also a rescue dog. The only individual who can meet it is another puppy, because they don't there is a certain play type between two young dogs, and that only a young dog can meet, not even an older dog. And definitely not humans. And so finding a dog who is of a similar age group, um, in a space where they can explore, they can get their functional movement, they can have sensory enrichment together, while also playing together. And I think that is a great one too. So an older dog who's a mentor, a dog of the same age group who is, um, who is the same, who's like a friend, right, with whom they can play and explore and learn new things together. I think that is a great one. But how do you decide to have who is a friend? And I think, you know when you have those interactions, if both dogs, and of course these interactions should be one on one, especially with companion dogs, it's always better to have one on one interaction. Because the moment a third dog enters into the space, there is change in dynamics, there's change in the way each of them interact with each other, but how all three work together, how each of their emotions impact each other. I think it becomes a bigger, more complicated dynamic to work with. So it's best done one on one, best done when both dogs have the choice to walk away if they want to. And as Sindur also says, and how, like, I've conveyed this to my clients too, that quit while you're ahead. If you've had a good play for 5 minutes, then you can call it off in 5 minutes. You don't. And I did have a client who ended up in a situation where they went for a one-on-one interaction with another dog, a play date, if you would want to call that. And it went on longer than necessary, to a point where the dogs ended up having a conflict situation. So it's always best when you quit while you're ahead. Have, even if it's just a couple of minutes of meet and greet and done, in the first few interactions, than have like a 1 hour or even half an hour interaction that ends badly. So I think that's like the few things that I'll keep in mind when I'm doing a dog dog interaction, especially where both dogs are companion animals. Is I think find well regulated dogs, dogs who have the ability to walk away from the situation, dogs whose humans are also on board and are well tuned into their dogs' um, behavior patterns and their communication. And if your dog is a young dog, then you might want to have older dogs as mentors and younger dogs as friends, and facilitate sensory enrichment environments, functional movements as part of the environment where they're interacting. Because then then entire attention is not on the other dog. They have space to take a break and then go and then sniff around, maybe just explore a new object lying around, sniff, and shred and all of that, right? Bite on, chew on things, rip apart things. I think a lot of these activities are great to do together, of course not involving food initially. But I've seen that happen with our street dogs as well. Laddu Lady and Bala tend to go and then explore spaces together, and that is their social interaction, that is their play. For most part they do have the hyper play that happens, which is very short lived, and when there are other things in the environment, they're not fixated on each other. So that's a great one as well. um, and quit while you're ahead. Definitely quit while you're ahead. Don't push an interaction so long that you end up in a situation where both the dogs are tired, they are frustrated, irritable, and then lash out and have an conflict with each other. Then you would have to start from scratch. um, does that make sense? Especially for those of you who might be watching the interactions that our dogs have with free living dogs and feel like, how to model it for your dogs where you don't have access to free living dogs, or you live in a space, even in India, if you live in a space where there are free living dogs who have who want nothing to do with pet dogs. That those are situations too, and these are a good this is a good place to start, um, for your dogs. So I think that was the last question that I wanted to answer. Oh my goodness, today just so long in just answering questions. Um, how many of you were here during the research paper discussion that happened on Instagram last weekend? Of course, if you were not here, I will put it on the highlights, on my Instagram. But I did share a post, that was. hmm, yeah, I did share a post that kind of summarized my discussion with people. What you're seeing here was the passage that I picked up from the paper, and these were all the thoughts that we had. I'll come back to this one. I will reshare the passage that I was talking about, right? The name of the paper is Attachment Behavior of Adult Dogs, Canis Familiaris, Living at Rescue Centers, Forming Newborns. It is claimed that during an early sensitive period, puppies are ready to form close social relationships not only with their mothers but also with members of other species, for example, with rabbits or most commonly with humans. Dogs seem to show innate responsiveness to humans that is not influenced by feeding, and even punishment does not extinguish the proximity seeking of pups to a handler. Moreover, puppies show social attraction to humans even if they were exclusively strictly disciplined during handling. So I shared this and I asked people to share their thoughts, and we had quite an interesting interaction around that. Um, you can see that on my post on Instagram. It's up there. But I think I left you all with this bit, which is one more thing that is worth thinking about. The author suggests that dogs seem to show innate responsiveness to humans that is not influenced by feeding. So when does it change that our dogs stop responding to us? Why does that happen? Why do we start using treats and food so obsessively to get our dog's attention? I think this is where I kind of left you all with. Um, and I wanted to know what your thoughts are about this. Did you get um, chance to kind of think about it? I did get a few responses to that. I'll bring up those responses as well. And I don't have those responses up here, but yeah. So there were a few reactions to this, and I'm going to read them. One was because it gives us humans a sense of being in control. Interesting one, right? So, why do we start using treats and food so obsessively to get our dog's attention? Why does this happen that our dogs stop responding to us? When does it change? If our dogs are innately tuned to respond to us humans, and that is not influenced by feeding, right? So there was one response which was because it gives us humans a sense of being in control. The other response was food becomes more enticing if the bond is built around food alone. Interesting one. um, Possibly if we pester them too much, it kind of becomes like the boy who cried wolf, trust is lost. So I think this is in response to why does that happen, why do they stop responding to us. And when we want to force what they do to suit us, otherwise they are naturally to uh, tuned to, I think it got cut off because of the limit. But I think tuned to us, tuned to being called. So these are the responses, very interesting ones. So there were people who said that it can food acts as a way to control them. Very interesting one. It could also be that they might stop responding to us because we are constantly bothering them and calling them when it's not necessary, and seeking their attention or asking them to pay attention to us when it's not required. um, Maybe the relationship has been built around food and treats, and so that might be the only way that the dog knows to bond with the humans. um, and when we want them to behave in a manner that suits us. uh, Thoughts that you might have about these reactions? So what stood out for me about that thing was that how our dogs are wired to pay attention to us, to respond to us, to um, be connected to us. And why aren't we using their innate responsiveness and instead trying to build this responsiveness through treats and food? But before that, it you can only experience that innate responsiveness if our dogs are actually responding to us. So why does that stop then? And I think that is an important one, because I think that and this is again a larger conversation as well, but uh, when our dogs end up being in our homes and we are constantly um, controlling all aspects of their lives, not allowing them to listen to their own body cues, not allowing them to make decisions of how they want to navigate a particular situation, putting them in overwhelming and overstimulating spaces and situations, not respecting their developmental stages, not reading their communication. When we end up in that kind of a situation, um, we are making them so dysregulated and overwhelmed, stressed, hyper, wired up, that they are no more innately or no more able to exercise that innate responsiveness. Do you Are you able to understand what I'm trying to say? I don't know if that came through to you, but it's almost like they are so hyper, or so stressed, or so tuned out from what's happening around them, that they're not able to have a good communication channel with us, just because of the kind of environment or situation that they are in. So I think communication channels kind of falter when our dogs are dysregulated, and that happens to us as well, right? When we are overstimulated, when we are overwhelmed, when we are wired up, stressed out, angry, frustrated, we don't do that well with communication, right? We can't hear people out properly. We can't respond to them properly. We have heightened reactions to situations, which, if we were in a much better space, if we were regulated enough, we probably might have had a better response to it. So, first and foremost, it's important to think about how responsiveness is can be one factor can be communication, and communication gets affected when you are dysregulated. And then what makes our dogs lives dysregulated is worth thinking about, right? So I think that's one thing that kind of popped up for me interestingly. And I think uh, we had Laddu's first car ride yesterday, right? So we were supposed to go somewhere, and there have been situations where Laddu tends to follow our vehicle all through the way, and it can get very scary to do that. So we decided that either we leave them at home, all the streeties at home, and go out, because we were supposed to step out for something, for a very quick errand to run. Or we decided that we'll take Laddu around, because along with us, because he's the one who follows us around. The others tend to like stay back, but he follows the vehicle. So we were like, we'll take him in the car. um, it's interesting that the only way I need to get his attention is through calling his name. And he has learned that his name is Laddu. He's so responsive to his name. um, and we had to call him out. No leash, no harness, right? How many of us cannot step out with our dogs without a harness or leash attached to them? um, but Laddu came into the car. He came inside. He jumped into the car. No leash, no harness, no treats. All with just the connection that we have formed, the ability to communicate between each other, using just our bond to negotiate and have a conversation with each other. Um, and that was interesting, because through the whole journey, a journey that otherwise would be so stressful, I've heard a lot of dog parents say, my dog just refuses to get into the vehicle. He just does not enter, and I have to lure him into the car with treats. But I didn't have to do the same thing with Laddu. Laddu is not even a dog that has grown up under my care. He has had experiences before. Car ride is not something that he has ever experienced before. Not especially not a car ride that was a good, the entire journey to go there, finish the work that we had, and come back was about 45 minutes in total. Of course, he was not alone. Zoe was there as well, and I was there too, through the whole journey. My husband was there as well. Obviously, all of us were there. He was not alone in that thing, but we didn't need food or treats to get him to respond to us, to listen to what we're trying to say, and for me to also respond back to him with reassurance and being there for him. So I think, first and foremost, obviously regulation is important, but also to build the relationship, um, that they're innately able to. And that is what I think the paper mentions, that they're innately able to build relationship and responsiveness without feeding. That has nothing to do with feeding. And that is obviously an interesting one. um, of course, that came up for me yesterday when I was thinking about how we have tried to build a relationship with the street dogs, which has nothing to do with food and feeding. And I think that was one of the responses, which is, what if you have only built the relationship with food and feeding? Maybe the human and the dog in that situation has no other way then to bond. So that was another interesting one. And of course, the fact that if you want them to do certain things that is not necessary, but you just want them to do because you have a certain standard that you want your dog to meet, then you are obviously taking them away from their innate responsiveness. They may not want to respond to you just without treats and food being a big motivator, big need. Our dogs might just end up responding to the food that is a basic need than actually what you're trying to ask of them. So I think these were the few things that stood out for me about that passage. This paper was very interesting. I feel like there were a lot of other things in the paper that was worth talking about, and not just the paper itself, but a lot of papers that were referenced in this paper. So I do want to have this discussion a lot more in detail about just this paper and the papers referenced here. many of you did mention that you do want to take part in these kind of discussions. So if you do, then DM me, or I would put up a post maybe today or tomorrow about how we would take this forward, right? So that was the update about research. Was there anything else that I wanted to discuss today? There was one about reflection on the question that I saw elsewhere, but I think we are running out of time because it's already 9:40 p.m. in India. So what I would instead do is leave you to think about, are there instances where you feel like you're being judged as a dog caregiver or as a dog professional based on your dog's behavior, and how does that make you feel? I think that is a good point to kind of end on. There are two more links that I actually, there were two posts that I wanted to talk about. Um, so it is a good idea to just probably share them here. I'll leave the link here and probably add it in the comments after the live is done as well. And have a look at both of them, and we'll discuss both in the next live, right? In the meantime, while I do that, why don't you let me know how was today's live? What did you think about it? What were your takeaways? Any things that you're left to ponder about? Um, Let me know. So the one link that I've put now is an Instagram reel by a psychologist, a therapist. Um, she I'm guessing her pronouns are she. I'm not sure. I will reconfirm. But she put up. She's a black woman who talks about how social cultural structures um, affect mental health, right? So she talks about the intersectionality of mental health conversations. And this particular reel that I have shared, the link that I've shared, she talks about being too needy. And is there such a thing as being too needy? Of course, all these conversations that she has is around human mental health, but as we know, a lot of these conversations do apply to dogs as well. So go ahead, have a look at that reel, have a look at what she has to say about being too needy, and we will talk more about it in our next live. There was another post that I wanted to share with you, which was a Facebook post. And this is by a person that I follow very closely, and their Facebook um, handle is called Neurowild. Uh, she is she's a speech therapist, so she works with neurodivergent individuals, and she talks a lot about neurodiversity affirming approaches. Have a look at what she has to say about this here in this post, because this has a lot to do with the active avoidance we spoke about. Um, so these are the two posts, and we will talk about both of these things in the next live. And we will talk about the question that I leave you with is, do you think at any point you're judged for your dog's behaviors? Do you feel like you have to get your dog to behave in a certain socially acceptable manner because of the judgment that comes across towards their behaviors? And how does that make you feel, if at all you are in that situation? If you don't feel you're judged as well, why do you feel so? Why do you think that the judgment does not affect you, or there is no judgment involved in social context for your dogs and their behaviors, and how does that make you feel as well? So we will talk about that and the two posts that I have put up here on the chat right now, but I will share it in the comment below as well if you are watching it later. If you liked this live that we had today, do like the video, share it with people, invite a lot of your friends to do come and then check out the channel, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next Wednesday. If you have observed, I have changed the time to 8 p.m. And 8 p.m. IST. Is that a better time for you? Do let me know. And Chandni says that looking forward, Rico and I have been judged, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts and discuss next week. Yes, definitely. I think I have been judged too, And I know that there have been occasions where I have fallen for that judgment and felt embarrassed. And there have been times where I have kind of overcome it. So we will talk about that and my journey with it as well. So I'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. IST. And we will talk more about all of the things that I mentioned and more if things come up next. I will share information about how we can create a research group, research club, if you will, and we will have more of these discussions on where you can actively participate on research paper related discussions. And we will see, I will announce that soon. Tomorrow is Sammy's birthday, uh, birth anniversary, I guess now. He would have turned 13 tomorrow. So I actually wanted to do something for his birthday, but I don't think I have the mind space or the bandwidth or the motivation or whatever you'd like to say for it. So I guess tomorrow is break for me, and it's a good, well-deserved break for me. I think I need to take a step back in general. So yes, tomorrow is his birthday. If you do remember this, if you're watching it tomorrow, if Sammy has touched your life in whatever manner, do send a wish for him tomorrow. It would mean the world to me. Um, and I think with that, it's a good point to end the stream today. Have a good day, have a good evening, wherever you are from. If you are in India, thank you for staying and listening in for so long and so late into the night. Hope you have a great night and a great week ahead. I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.